Story 1. The woman in seat 14A, the airport, was too bright for 2:17 in the morning. Everything reflected. The polished floors reflected ceiling lights in long white rivers. The windows reflected tired travelers hunched over phones and coffee cups. Even the rain outside reflected silver against the dark glass, turning the entire terminal into something cold and unreal. Daniel Mercer noticed brightness first in every room he entered. It was an old habit. Years ago, noticing details had meant survival. Brightness meant visibility. Visibility meant angles. Angles meant risk. Most habits faded after enough time. That one never had. He sat near gate C14 with a paper cup of coffee cooling, untouched in his hand, while announcements echoed through the terminal in soft mechanical voices that no one truly listened to anymore. Storm over Chicago. Delays across the eastern corridor. Flights pushed back another hour. People complained quietly. A businessman near the charging station muttered curses into a headset. A young mother bounced a crying toddler against her shoulder, with the exhausted rhythm of someone running on fumes. 2 college students slept across their backpacks beneath a television showing whether maps no one trusted. Daniel watched all of it without really watching. His body occupied the airport. His mind stayed somewhere farther away. Denver, his apartment, the silence waiting for him there. At 38 years old, Daniel had perfected the art of returning to empty rooms without feeling angry about it. Not happy, not sad, just accustomed. He repaired commercial aircraft navigation systems for a subcontractor most passengers never knew existed. Invisible work performed at odd hours inside maintenance hangars beneath fluorescent lights. He liked the precision of it. Machines made sense. Machines failed for reasons. People failed for reasons too, but the reasons were harder to diagnose. He lifted the coffee finally, cold already. Of course, he almost smiled. Then he noticed the woman across from him, not because she was beautiful, although she was. Not in the obvious way airports occasionally displayed through polished luxury and expensive clothes. Her beauty came from control, from restraint, from the unsettling composure of someone holding themselves together by force. Dark wool coat, black gloves, hair pinned carefully back. No luggage except a slim leather carry-on beside her leg. Everyone else in the gate area moved with irritation or exhaustion. She sat perfectly still. Daniel felt something tighten quietly inside his chest. Fear, contained fear. He recognized it instantly. Most people imagined fear as panic. Real fear was quieter. Real fear sat motionless because motion risked collapse. The woman checked the departure board exactly every 40 seconds. Not approximately, exactly. Daniel noticed because he counted without meaning to. Then a man approached her, mid-50s, expensive charcoal suit, silver hair, pleasant face. The kind of face corporations selected carefully for leadership positions because it suggested trustworthiness without warmth. He sat beside her without invitation. The woman did not look at him. That interested Daniel immediately. Most people looked toward discomfort. Ignoring it required intention. The man said something, too quietly to hear. The woman answered once, then stopped speaking entirely. The man smiled. Daniel felt his attention sharpen. People who smiled while someone else was afraid always deserved watching. Rain crawled slowly down the windows behind him. The airport announcement system crackled overhead. Flight 228 to Boston now boarding priority passengers. The woman stood immediately. Too immediately. Relief moved through her body before she could hide it. The man stood too, not beside her, in front of her, blocking the direct path toward the boarding lane. Daniel set down his coffee. Something old and unwelcome woke quietly inside him. Instinct, assessment, geometry, distance to the exits, distance to security, distance between the woman and the man. The woman finally spoke clearly enough for him to hear. I said I'm not going with you. Quiet voice, controlled. The man's smile never changed. You're tired, Naomi. Not angry, certain. That certainty bothered Daniel more than aggression would have. Aggressive men wanted reactions. Certain men expected obedience. Daniel crossed the terminal before consciously deciding to. He moved casually. No urgency. Urgency attracts attention. Attention complicates things. He stopped beside the woman and looked mildly confused. "There you are," he said. Both of them turned toward him. Daniel continued before either could respond. "You left your phone with me again." A lie. Simple lies worked best. Complicated lies invited examination. The woman stared at him for half a second, then understood. Fast. Relief flashed once across her face before disappearing beneath composure. The man recovered first. "And you are," Daniel smiled with practiced exhaustion. "The husband." The word changed the air instantly. Not because the man believed him completely, because witnesses changed equations. Public scenes became dangerous once another variable entered them. The woman moved immediately, smoothly, stepping beside Daniel rather than behind him. Smart. The suited man recalculated. Daniel watched it happen in real time. The narrowing eyes, the shift in posture, the instant internal arithmetic. "You must be mistaken," the man said lightly. "Possible," Daniel answered. "Long week." Then he turned toward the woman. "You ready?" Another tiny pause, then, "Yes." The man's eyes hardened for exactly 1 second. Enough. Then the pleasant expression returned. "Safe travels," he said. Daniel nodded once. He and the woman walked away together. Neither spoke until they reached the far end of Terminal C near a shuttered bookstore and a row of dark windows overlooking the rain-soaked runway. Only then did she exhale, not dramatically. Like someone who had been holding air inside themselves for hours, Daniel leaned against a vending machine. "You know him?" he asked. "Yes, dangerous. Yes, police. No." That answer somehow sounded worse. The woman closed her eyes briefly. "My name is Naomi Vale." Recognition hit him a second later. Vale Dynamics. Defense technology. Congressional investigations 6 months ago. Artificial surveillance systems. National headlines. Daniel looked at her more carefully. "You're the CEO." "I was." Past tense. Heavy past tense. "The man back there. My former chief legal officer." Former. He disagrees with the word. Rain struck the windows harder now. Wind pushed against the terminal glass in long, moaning gusts. Daniel folded his arms. "You want to tell me what's happening?" Naomi looked toward the gate. For the first time since he'd approached her, she appeared tired instead of controlled. It changed her face completely. "He's trying to bring me back," she said quietly. "To the company, to the arrangement." Daniel waited. Most people filled silence because silence frightened them. Naomi didn't. Eventually, she continued. 3 months ago, I resigned from Vale Dynamics after discovering several internal surveillance programs were being sold illegally through shell contracts overseas. Daniel's expression didn't change. Inside, old instincts sharpened further. "You reported it." "Yes, and powerful people became very unhappy with me." The simplicity of the statement made it worse. Daniel rubbed a hand slowly across his jaw. "You have federal protection." "I had federal protection." That answer landed heavily. "You think someone compromised it?" "I know they did." Daniel studied her carefully. No dramatics, no exaggeration, just exhaustion layered over intelligence. And underneath both of those things, loneliness, deep loneliness. He knew that look too. He carried a version of it himself. An announcement interrupted them. "Final boarding call for Flight 228 to Boston." Naomi glanced toward the gate, then back at him. "You should leave before this becomes your problem," she said. Daniel considered that. He should. Absolutely. He had spent years constructing a life built specifically around avoiding complications. No entanglements, no unnecessary risks, no emotional catastrophes. Those rules existed for reasons. Good reasons, painfully earned reasons. And yet, he looked at Naomi standing beneath harsh airport lights, trying very hard not to appear frightened. Something inside him refused to walk away. "Are you actually in danger?" he asked. She held his gaze. Yes. No hesitation, no performance. Daniel sighed softly, then picked up his carry-on. What gate? He asked. She blinked. For what? Your flight. You're not coming with me. Probably not forever. For the first time that night, something almost like warmth touched her expression. Small, careful, human. Boston, she said quietly. Gate B9. Daniel nodded once. Then let's move before your lawyer finds friends. They walked quickly through the terminal together, not touching, not speaking. Two strangers moving through fluorescent midnight toward an uncertain destination. And for the first time in longer than Daniel could remember, the carefully controlled silence of his life had cracked open just enough for someone else to step inside. The flight left 43 minutes late. The storm worsened over Pennsylvania. Turbulence shook the cabin hard enough to wake sleeping passengers twice. Naomi never slept at all. Daniel noticed, because he didn't either. She sat beside the window in seat 14A, with her hands folded tightly together beneath the airline blanket, while city lights drifted far below them like scattered gold. He pretended to read. Mostly he watched reflections in the dark glass. You don't trust easily, Naomi said suddenly. Daniel glanced sideways. You gathered that from 20 minutes in an airport. No, she said quietly. From the way you keep checking the exits every time a flight attendant walks by. He almost smiled. Occupational habit. What occupation? Aircraft systems maintenance. That's not the occupation that taught you situational awareness. Daniel looked back toward the dark window. Smart. Very smart. Former military, he said. Special operations. He looked at her again. How did you know that? You move like someone who spent years being watched. The answer unsettled him slightly because it was accurate. He studied her profile against the dim cabin lights. You notice everything, don't you? I have to. A pause, then softer. It's expensive when I don't. Something about the way she said it reached him unexpectedly, not the words. The exhaustion behind it. He understood exhaustion, not physical fatigue, the deeper kind. The kind that came from carrying vigilance too long. Outside, lightning flickered silently through distant clouds. Daniel finally asked the question forming slowly in the back of his mind. Why Boston? Naomi stared ahead. Because there's someone there I still trust. Family? No. That single syllable carried enough history to stop him from asking more. The cabin lights dimmed further. Passengers slept. The storm continued. Naomi finally leaned her head back against the seat. You didn't have to help me, she said quietly. Daniel looked down at his hands. Yes, he said after a long moment. I did, she turned toward him slightly. Why? He could have lied, could have said something easy, polite. Instead, he answered honestly. Because once, he said quietly, someone needed help and I arrived too late. Naomi said nothing, but her expression changed. Not curiosity, recognition. The painful kind. People who carried grief recognized it in each other eventually. Sometimes immediately. The plane descended through rain toward Boston just before dawn. The city appeared beneath them slowly. Wet streets, gray harbor water, cold November light crawling over rooftops. Daniel had always liked cities best before sunrise. They felt honest then, too tired to perform. The airport terminal in Boston was quieter than Chicago. Cleaner somehow. Naomi walked quickly once they landed. Purposefully. Daniel stayed beside her. You expecting someone? He asked. Yes. Do you trust them completely? No. That answer made him feel oddly reassured. At baggage claim, a woman in a navy coat approached them. Early 60s. Sharp eyes, controlled posture. She hugged Naomi immediately. Not formally. Tightly. Relief crossed Naomi's face so suddenly it almost hurt to witness. Eleanor, she whispered. The older woman pulled back. You're late. There was weather. Then Eleanor noticed Daniel. Her attention sharpened instantly. And who is this? Naomi hesitated, only briefly. This is Daniel. Not husband, not friend. Just Daniel. Oddly, that felt more intimate. Eleanor studied him with open suspicion. Can he be trusted? Daniel nearly laughed. Naomi answered before he could. Yes, the certainty in her voice surprised both of them. Alina nodded once. Then come quickly, we shouldn't stay here. Outside, Boston was cold and silver beneath the rain. A black sedan waited at the curb. Daniel paused before getting inside. Something felt wrong. Tiny details. The driver avoided eye contact. The car idled too steadily. A man across the street pretending to smoke watched them too carefully. Daniel's pulse slowed. Old instincts again. He touched Naomi's sleeve lightly. Don't get in! She froze instantly. Alina looked sharply toward him. Why? Daniel kept his voice calm. The man by the newspaper stand has been watching this car since we exited the terminal. Alina's expression changed. Not surprise, recognition. You're certain? Yes. The driver opened his door too quickly. Daniel made the decision immediately. Walk, he said. Naomi didn't argue. Neither did Alina. They moved together into the crowded morning sidewalk just as the driver called after them. Daniel glanced back once. The smoking man touched his ear. Communication. Someone else was listening. Daniel felt the situation tightening around them. And somewhere beneath the danger, beneath the calculations and adrenaline and uncertainty, he realized something quietly devastating. He no longer wanted to leave. Not because of obligation, because of her. Naomi walked beside him through freezing rain with her coat pulled tightly closed and trussed slowly, carefully beginning to exist between them. And Daniel Mercer, who had spent years constructing a life built on distance, suddenly found himself terrified of disappearing from someone else's liking. Hash story 2. The house on Blackwater Lane, the house had been empty for 11 years. Everyone in Blackwater County knew this because everyone in Blackwater County measured time according to the Mercer house. Before the fire, after the fire, the year the widow disappeared. The year strangers bought the property and left 3 weeks later. The year someone saw lights in the upstairs windows during a thunderstorm. Small towns preserved stories the way old wood preserved smoke. Nothing ever fully left. Elias Ward arrived in November with 2 suitcases, a truck full of tools, and no interest whatsoever in local legends. He had purchased the Mercer property online without seeing it in person because the price had been suspiciously low, and because suspiciously low prices no longer frightened him. At 39, exhaustion and practicality had slowly become the same thing. The first thing he noticed about the house was silence, not ordinary quiet. The specific silence of places that have gone too long without being lived in. The second thing he noticed was the woman standing across the road watching him unload boxes. Gray coat, dark umbrella. No expression. She remained there for nearly 10 minutes before finally crossing the road. You bought it, she said, not a question. Elias wiped dust from his hands. Seems that way. The woman studied him with unsettling directness. You should leave before dark. He almost smiled. Because of the ghosts? No, she said. Then after a pause, because people in this town are afraid of what they don't understand, and fear makes them cruel. That answer interested him enough to pay attention. My name's Elias. Claire Holloway. He recognized the surname immediately. Half the businesses in town carried it. Holloway Hardware, Holloway Farms, Holloway Bank, old family, important family. Claire looked toward the house. You should replace the back door lock tonight, she said. Why? Because someone will try it. Then she walked away. Elias stood in the cold yard, watching her disappear through drifting November fog, and decided the town was either deeply dramatic or deeply dangerous. Possibly both. At 1:13 in the morning, someone tested the back door. Not loudly, carefully, professionally. Elias was awake before the second movement against the handle. Years in emergency response work had left him with a nervous system that never fully slept. He moved silently through the dark kitchen. Another slow turn of the handle, then stillness. Whoever stood outside understood the lock had been replaced. Interesting. Elias flicked on the exterior floodlight. The yard exploded into white light. Empty, but not entirely empty. Fresh footprints crossed the frost beneath the kitchen window. Small footprints. A woman S. He followed them to the road. They ended beside tire tracks. The next morning, Claire Holloway appeared at his porch holding coffee and looking unsurprised. "You stayed," she said. "So did your burglar." Something unreadable moved across her face. "Did they get inside?" "No," Claire handed him the coffee. "Then you're already doing better than the last owner." Elias stared at her. "The last owner died?" "No," she said, a pause. "He ran." Wind moved through the dead trees surrounding the property. Somewhere farther down the road, a dog barked once. Elias looked toward the empty upstairs windows. "What exactly happened in this house?" Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My sister disappeared here 11 years ago." The sentence settled heavily between them. Elias leaned against the porch railing. "The fire. There wasn't supposed to be a survivor." He looked at her carefully then. "You think someone stayed after the fire?" "I think someone still comes back." Most people would have laughed. Most people would have called the sheriff. Elias instead asked, "What makes you certain?" Claire met his eyes. "Because every November," she said quietly, "someone leaves fresh flowers in my sister's old bedroom." Cold moved slowly through Elias' chest. Not fear, recognition. The recognition of a puzzle that already had missing pieces. He looked back toward the house. Second floor, far left window, curtains slightly open, watching. "Show me the room," he said. Claire stared at him. "You believe me?" "No," Elias answered honestly. Then after a beat, "But I believe somebody wants you frightened enough to leave this alone." For the first time since arriving in Blackwater County, Claire Holloway smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had finally found another person willing to open the locked door instead of pretending it wasn't there. And upstairs, in the silent house on Blackwater Lane, floorboards shifted softly where no one should have been standing at all.